"Ma'am, the mission is active again. This time no shadows." I never imagined the first words I'd hear at my 20-year high school reunion would come from a man in a military uniform speaking through the whir of a helicopter. A moment before that, I was sitting in the farthest corner of the banquet hall, sipping lukewarm champagne from a plastic flute, pretending I didn't hear them laugh. The slideshow playing on the projector skipped past me like I'd never existed. Until a picture popped up. Me, braces, sweat-stained orchestra shirt, caught mid-sneeze. The room howled. "Still the same," someone murmured near the buffet. "Still Miss Nobody." Ali, my younger sister, stepped up to the mic with that rehearsed warmth she wore like a politician's mask. "Let's hear it for the forgotten souls who never quite made it out of this gym," she chuckled, her eyes scanning the room and landing on me. She smiled. I didn't. In that moment, I was every version of myself they remembered. Awkward, silent, invisible. The kind of person whose existence is background noise to others' stories. But I wasn't that anymore. The windows trembled as the sound grew louder. Some looked up, some laughed nervously. Ali's voice faltered. That's when the doors burst open. And he stepped in, full dress uniform, medals, a salute. "Colonel Hale," he said over the hush. "Ma'am, the Pentagon's awaiting your signal." And just like that, everything stilled. The moment I stepped into the Aspen Ridge ballroom, I could smell it. That mix of expensive perfume, ambition, and decades of denial. My name tag read Rebecca Lane. No rank, no initials, just Rebecca. That wasn't even my real last name anymore. I'd changed it legally 6 years ago during the Cyprus assignment. Ali didn't know. No one here did. That was the point. "Rebecca?" she squealed, gliding toward me in a crimson sheath dress that cost more than my entire travel stipend. Her hug was all teeth and theatre. "God, you look so settled. I almost didn't recognize you." That word. Settled. Like I'd chosen stillness instead of being left behind. "I heard you moved back to the States," she went on, linking her arm with mine before I could answer. "That must be such a relief after, what was it, non-profit work overseas?" I gave a non-committal nod. Let her believe what she needed to. She lived on polished stories, ones that fit neatly into conference panels and podcast bios. Mine was harder to explain. She dragged me toward a group near the stage. Former class president, 2 surgeons, someone from a TED talk I vaguely remembered. They smiled with that strained politeness reserved for strangers who used to share a locker row. Jason was among them. His smirk was dulled now, lined with time and 3 failed marriages. He raised a glass, nodding at me like I was a case file he couldn't quite close. "You still teaching abroad, Becca?" he asked. "She's doing NGO work," Ali answered for me. "Humanitarian contracts or something. Very underground," the group chuckled. I let them. I'd briefed NATO with the same lips that now sipped flat champagne. Melissa stood at the bar, watching me with a gaze that wasn't pity, just curiosity. She didn't move toward me. Not yet. She was still deciding which version of me she believed. A slideshow flickered behind us, graduation caps, prom nights, talent shows, Ali in every third frame, me in one, blurry, mid-blink, probably cropped in later. I excused myself to the balcony, claiming the air was too thick. It was, but not from oxygen, from history. As I stepped outside, the doors closed behind me, muting the curated nostalgia. The silence was familiar, not comforting, tactical. I leaned against the rail and stared into the dark. That's when my phone buzzed. A secure line. Only 3 people had that number, and 2 of them were either dead or in hiding. The name on the encrypted call blinked once. Wraith Echo. I hadn't seen that designation in over 3 years. The voice came low, composed. "Ma'am, we have a signal deviation matching your old vector. Origin, domestic, Northern Virginia, 32 minutes ago." "Confirmed sender?" I asked, already turning toward the parking lot. Scrambled through 3 dead relays, but the signature matches Project Fulcroft. It's a burn trace. My mouth went dry. Fulcroft had been sealed. A memory erased. A mission scrubbed so deep even the code name had been decommissioned. I'll need full-spectrum diagnostics. Tonight. Already in your cloud vault, Echo 5, and Ma'am. Yes? You might want to watch the reunion live stream playback. At timestamp 1:14:37, someone mentions you by rank. I froze. Who? There was a pause. We're still confirming, but... Your sister? I didn't answer. I ended the call and walked back inside. The ballroom had shifted. Lights lower now, music softened. The attention had drifted from legacy to gossip. Melissa spotted me first. Her brows lifted just slightly, curious, cautious. She nodded toward a table near the back, motioning for me to join her. I thought you left, she said. I stepped outside, I replied, sliding into the seat beside her. Got a message from the future. She smiled faintly. Still the cryptic one. There was a pause, then she added, Chloe gave a speech while you were gone. It was veiled. I tilted my head. She said something about unsung legacies, how some people serve the story by staying silent, and how others confuse mystery with merit. The room spun subtly, as if gravity had shifted by a degree. Chloe's voice still played softly in the background, piped from the AV feed near the lobby. Melissa leaned in. She's planting seeds, Becca. She knows something, or she thinks she does. Teo. I said nothing, just sipped from the untouched glass at my table, eyes on the glowing cake, the slideshow on loop. Then the screen paused, for the first time that night, and glitched. For half a second, an image appeared. A military insignia, grainy, cropped, but unmistakable, the edge of a silver star. Then it vanished, replaced by prom pictures. No one else seemed to notice, but someone had slipped it in. On purpose. That wasn't just a visual error, that was a message. I looked at Melissa. You saw that? Her face had gone pale. Was that you? I didn't answer. Somewhere inside me, gears long dormant started to turn again. This night wasn't just about nostalgia. It was bait. And someone had just triggered the line. I wasn't born dangerous. I was made. I remember the first time I held a weapon, not a rifle or sidearm, but code. Pure, silent lines of logic that could erase banks, shut down drones, black out cities. I was 21 when I was recruited straight out of a community college cryptography lecture. Not West Point, not Langley, just me. A nobody with a record of vanishing from photos and beating every firewall handed to her. By 25, I was already embedded in Task Force Echo, the kind of black ops initiative that didn't exist outside ash-printed folders burned within a minute of reading. No medals, no rank shown, just code names and silence. Mine was the Fulcrum, the point around which quiet wars tilted. I never fought for applause. I fought to stop the world from falling apart by ensuring no one ever knew it almost had. And that worked. Until the Cyprus operation. We were deep in a multi-layered extraction, 3 diplomats, 8 defence files, and a compromised UN convoy. I rerouted satellite surveillance, built a new identity mid-flight, and personally walked an asset across the Albanian border dressed as a nun. Then I disappeared. Officially, I was discharged due to protocol breach. Unofficially, someone had intercepted my personal clearance channel and flagged me for emotional instability. The source? An internal submission signed by C. Hale, Ali. I only saw the redacted file once, by accident, during an off-grid sync. My name was blacked out, but the accusation was unmistakable. Subject prioritizes personal emotion over mission clarity. Risk of unsanctioned ethical override. That wasn't a military phrase. That was legal language. Department of Justice Legal. I remember sitting in a dim-lit NATO server farm, staring at that sentence for hours. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed everything I had buried. Ali hadn't just ignored my service. She had weaponized my silence. I stared at the name again. C. Hale, Chloe's legal alias. I hadn't seen it since our father's estate hearing, where she signed documents with that signature. Elegant, slanted, confident. Everything about her was always polished, even her betrayals. I flew back to DC without alerting command, not to disappear, but to reappear on my own terms. Melissa met me in the safe house. She didn't ask questions, just slid a folder across the table. "You need to see this," she said. Inside were transcripts, email trails from Chloe's DOJ account, encrypted but intercepted through an abandoned relay she forgot to scrub. Lines like, "I've submitted the medal block request, can't have her name overshadowing optics. Control the narrative, keep Rebecca obscure, power is public." Another file held the alumni board petition draft, her proposal to recontextualize my military file for PR clarity. Recontextualize. That wasn't just erasure, that was rewriting. My throat tightened, but I kept reading. This wasn't about one moment, it had never been. This was a 20-year operation of systematic subtraction, smiling sabotage executed in silk blazers and podcast-ready tones. Melissa was watching me. "She doesn't understand what she activated, does she?" I asked. "No," she said, "but she will." I stood, the hum of the tablet screen still echoing. "Then it's time to brief the Pentagon," I said. "We're not cleaning this up anymore, we're taking control." As we left, Melissa said, "Rebecca, you don't have to be seen to matter." "I know," I said, slipping my ID badge into the reader, "but sometimes they need to see." The auditorium had not changed much in 2 decades. Same wooden stage, same maroon curtains, same scent of polished linoleum mixed with nervous ambition. Chloe stood at the podium, ivory suit, pristine, voice steady. "Leadership," she said, "isn't about glory. It's about being present, consistent, transparent." The audience, alumni, faculty, media, nodded along, polite, engaged, just like she planned. Behind the side curtain I waited. No uniform, civilian black blazer, hair pinned back, the medal pinned inside my coat pocket. Still unseen. But not for long. Chloe's voice rose, practiced. "My sister once told me that silence was strength, but sometimes," she paused for effect, "silence is just avoidance." The crowd laughed softly, and that was my cue. I stepped into the aisle. Gasps fluttered like dominoes tipping, cameras tilted. A reporter at the back whispered into her mic. Lieutenant General Rebecca Cole just entered the room. I didn't rush. My boots hit the stairs with purpose. Chloe froze mid-sentence. Her smile wavered. I reached the edge of the stage. 3 minutes, I said to the board chair. He nodded, stunned. I stepped to the podium, standing precisely where she had, her shadow still warm on the mic. "My name is Rebecca Cole," I began. Silence followed, that kind that pulls every breath into a single, unified pause. "I graduated from this school 20 years ago, first chair in orchestra, varsity debate, co-founder of the International Relations Club, and then I left, quietly, voluntarily. Not because I couldn't compete," I looked at Chloe, "but because I was already choosing a different battlefield." I slid a photo from my pocket, a black and white still of me in full uniform, shoulder to shoulder with General Aubrey Clean, NATO command. Gasps again, this time louder. "I've been called invisible," I continued, "and I accepted that. Because real impact doesn't always show up in headlines or hashtags or highlight reels." I turned slightly. My gaze met Chloe's, her expression unreadable now. "But today, I reclaim my voice, not to retaliate, but to correct the record." The screen behind me flickered on. Melissa from the control booth triggered it. Lines of text appeared. redacted briefings, commendation citations, and finally the sealed Medal of Honor nomination memo with the forged withdrawal email signed C. Hale. The crowd inhaled as one. "I didn't need to be seen," I said, "but I won't be erased." No applause followed. Just something deeper. Stillness, the kind that settles only when truth lands too heavily to dismiss. I left the podium without flourish. Chloe remained frozen at stage left. Even her practiced poise cracked at the edges. Backstage, Melissa handed me a thumb drive. "You just rewrote the story," she whispered. "No," I replied. "I just started telling the real one." It didn't take long, less than 12 hours. By morning, the news had changed tones, from awe to suspicion. The headlines went from "Decorated war hero steps out of the shadows" to "Who is Rebecca Cole, really?" Hashtags swirled. Hashtag shadow soldier, hash sister sabotage, hash fake Fulcrum. And then the leak. An anonymous source dropped excerpts from classified operations, distorted, selectively redacted, just enough to imply I had acted without oversight, that I had endangered civilians, that I'd gone rogue. The screenshots were polished, credible enough to rattle the public. Someone knew how to build a narrative, and I knew exactly who. Chloe. She didn't just want silence, she wanted shame. Melissa burst into the safe house war room, tablet in hand. "She's playing dirty. Full DOJ comms are ghosting reporters. They're letting the ambiguity grow." Of course. Classic Chloe. No denial, no defense, just the illusion of weightless credibility, letting the internet convict me one comment at a time. "She wants you to respond emotionally," Melissa added, "to prove her narrative." "I'm not going to react," I said, though my fists clenched. "I'm going to escalate." I walked to the secure console and typed a 12-digit code I hadn't touched in years. The screen unlocked a buried channel, Echo Deep Archive. Melissa stiffened. That's active?" "It is now." I uploaded the full, unedited briefing files, time-stamped, encrypted with triple verification, including the real footage of Cyprus, including the medal nomination, including the DOJ memo that delayed it, with Chloe's original metadata signature. "It'll take 2 hours to verify through 3 major intel journals," I said. "After that, the press will have no choice but to run it." "And Chloe?" I looked up. Chloe's not just trying to erase me, she's building her campaign on the story that I was a myth. Melissa hesitated. "And what if she wins?" I paused, then said calmly, "Then she proves the world still prefers the lie that flatters it over the truth that challenges it." My phone buzzed. A message from an old command contact. "Need you at 0800, secure compound, full honours, bring the original." For a brief second, I closed my eyes. This wasn't just a fight for recognition anymore, it was a war for memory. The venue was the old Capitol Rotunda, now used for elite civilian honours, rows of flags, polished marble floors, and too many cameras for anyone to fake sincerity. Chloe stood near the front, flanked by 2 senators and a DOJ liaison. Her hair was perfect. Her teeth gleamed. And on the screen behind her flashed, National Recognition Ceremony, Service Integrity Legacy. The crowd was full of alumni, military brass, journalists. She had orchestrated it all, anticipating a standing ovation. She was ready to step into legacy as the sister who served from the courtroom. But she didn't know what I'd done. Yet. From the side corridor I waited. General Clean stood beside me, arms crossed. "You ready for the storm?" he asked. "It's already raining," I replied. "I just brought the lightning." A tap on the mic echoed through the rotunda. The MC, a decorated admiral, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "before we proceed, we've received new intelligence on a name long kept in shadow." The room stirred. Chloe's smile twitched. The screen behind him flickered. Photos began flashing. Missions previously sealed, maps with blurred codenames, decrypted metadata, then footage. Me, mid-operation in Cyprus, coordinating an airlift with NATO, and then a document stamped with the Pentagon seal. Nomination, Medal of Honor, Colonel Rebecca Cole, the Fulcrum. Gasps broke, a ripple of confusion, awe, and betrayal. Chloe took a step back. The camera light caught the corner of her mouth twitch. She wasn't confused. She was exposed. The Admiral's voice continued, firmer now. Today's honor, long overdue, belongs to a woman who chose silence, not weakness, strategy, not spotlight, and who until now let her service be her secret. He turned. Colonel Cole, the floor is yours. The crowd parted. I stepped forward, no longer hiding, no longer deferring. As I passed Chloe, she reached for my wrist. Her voice was a whisper only I could hear. I can still spin this. I looked her in the eyes. I'm not yours to edit. Then I walked on. The lights above glared hot. The seal of the United States shone behind me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch under recognition. I took the mic and said simply, I wasn't erased, I was embedded. The silence that followed wasn't confusion, it was reckoning. I stood beneath the dome of the Capitol, the medal now resting in the velvet box they'd pressed into my hands. The cameras were still rolling, but I no longer saw red lights, just faces, open, waiting. They wanted blood, but I wasn't here to bleed. Behind me, the screen displayed my full rank and citations. I turned back to the mic, my voice even. Some people build legacies through spotlight, some through silence, but some, I glanced toward Chloe, some try to curate history like a brand story, not because they hate the truth, but because they fear it won't fit. The room shifted, tension coiled like a held breath. She didn't steal my story, I continued. She grew up in the same house I did, where performance was praise, where our worth was measured in applause, not honesty. Chloe's jaw tightened. Her eyes glistened. She wasn't crying yet, but the armour was cracking. Our father once told her, "Don't be like your sister. She disappears." I paused. He was right. I did disappear. Into rooms he could never enter, battles he didn't know existed. But she stayed visible and paid for it with her soul. A long silence followed. Chloe stepped forward, slowly, carefully. Her heels clicked like confessions on marble. The Admiral moved, unsure if she was interrupting, but I lifted a hand. Let her come. She reached the mic but didn't take it. Instead, she looked at me, not as a rival, not as a role, but as something more raw, human. I didn't mean to destroy you, she said, voice low, cracked. I was just afraid no one would ever see me if they saw you. The room held its breath. I stepped closer, just enough to lower my voice so only she could hear. I was never trying to be seen, Chloe. I was trying to matter. She nodded, just once. No words left, only the hollow gravity of long-buried pain resurfacing. We turned back toward the audience together, for the first time side by side, not as performance, but as reckoning. I raised the medal slightly, then set it back into the velvet box. Truth, I said, doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just waits, and today it doesn't have to wait anymore. The crowd rose slowly, not roaring, not frenzied, just standing, like they'd witnessed something sacred, not just revelation, but redemption. The hotel room was quiet. No press, no flags, no microphones, just beige walls, 2 mugs of untouched tea, and the hum of a city trying to forget itself after midnight. Chloe sat across from me on the corner armchair, legs tucked under her like we were teenagers again, hiding from our father's lectures. Her blazer was off, makeup slightly smudged. For the first time in years, she looked small. I don't know where to begin, she said, voice hoarse. I didn't answer, just watched her stare at the steam from her tea like it held absolution. She tried again. Do you hate me? No. She looked up, surprised. After everything I did? You didn't erase me, I said. You tried, but you can't erase what was never done for recognition in the first place. Her throat bobbed. I thought if I was louder, shinier, faster, I'd finally be seen, she said, almost to herself. But I was chasing echoes. You weren't chasing echoes, I corrected. You were running from silence, our silence, the house we grew up in, the rules we learned. Chloe's voice broke. He always made me compete with a ghost. You didn't talk, didn't cry, didn't ask for anything. He loved that. And I hated you for making me feel loud and needy. My chest ached, not from anger, but recognition. He didn't love me for being quiet, Chloe, I said softly. He just didn't notice either of us unless we were convenient. That landed hard. We sat in the stillness that followed. No need to perform anymore. She looked at me again, really looked. What now? I leaned back. I move forward. I serve differently now, not from the shadows, not under spotlights, but in the open, honest, present. She nodded slowly. I want to learn how to do that, she said, without lying. You start by listening, I replied, to others, to yourself. There was a long pause. Then Chloe stood, walked over, and placed something on the coffee table between us, the medal box. I don't want to hold your weight anymore, she said, or your spotlight. You carried enough of mine. I didn't say thank you. Some words weren't meant to be spoken, only felt. We didn't hug. That wasn't our way. But when she left the room, she left the door open. And for the first time, that felt like enough. 1 year later, I stood in front of a classroom with no windows, Naval Postgraduate School, Intelligence and Cyber Division. 22 students, all brilliant, all impatient, all still clinging to the idea that impact required visibility. I clicked on the projector. A map lit up, digital, layered, shifting. Who was the highest-ranking officer on the Iran Grey Cascade operation? I asked. A hand shot up. Colonel Mercer. I shook my head. Wrong. Another. General Clean? Still wrong, I replied. There was no rank, no uniform, no name on file. They looked confused. She was embedded, anonymous, off roster. But her hand rerouted 4 planes and blocked an incoming EMP. You know how many civilians she saved? No answer. I looked each of them in the eye. 4 million. Silence. That woman wasn't in any news story, no headline, no award, just a quiet record, buried in a vault. A student raised his hand. So what was the point of it all if no one knew? That was the question. I paused, then walked to the front row, placing my hands flat on the desk. The point, I said, was that the world kept turning. That's the job. That's the legacy. He looked puzzled. But how do you live like that? Invisible? I smiled. You don't live invisible, you live intentional. He blinked, slowly nodded. After class, one student lingered. She was small, focused, maybe 24. She waited until everyone else had gone. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "are you really the Fulcrum?" I didn't answer right away. Then I opened my bag and pulled out a single patch, grey, no seal, no letters, just a small embroidered pivot point like the centre of a lever. I handed it to her. She clutched it with reverence, then asked, "What does it mean?" I looked toward the door. Sunlight slanted through the hallway window, touching the corner of my boots. "It means you don't need applause to know your weight," I said. "You just have to hold steady while the world moves." She nodded, and I walked away, not with fanfare, not with noise, just purpose.